What can the Seattle Seahawks learn from the Cincinnati Bengals this offseason? What's going on, everybody? Good morning. Happy Saturday. Hope you guys are doing well today. And we're going to take a little bit of a detour today. Not that I think anybody will particularly object to that, because we are in the deadest part of the offseason now officially, and there isn't a lot going on. But something happened yesterday, although really this has been brewing for a little while now. This has been kind of simmering under the surface of the offseason for a little bit, having to do with the Cincinnati Bengals. And while the Cincinnati Bengals are very, very far removed from the Seattle Seahawks, we don't share the division, we don't share the conference, we don't play them this upcoming year. There's not a lot of commonality between the Bengals and the Seahawks, other than the fact that they're both football teams. But there is something going on with the team this offseason that I cannot help but think about in light of the situation the Seahawks find themselves in right now. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on with the Bengals, and we're going to lead that back to the Seahawks in a way that I think is fairly clear and obvious. And I want to be clear, I'm not concerned about anything yet, but it does highlight the very, very clear need to get an upcoming decision that this team needs to make correct. So before I get into this, though, please click the thumbs up button on this video if you haven't already. Subscribe if you're new. Click the bell for notifications. Become a channel member for $2 a month. Those are the best ways to support the channel. So let's talk about the situation here. Back in April, the Cincinnati Bengals used their first-round pick on edge rusher Shamar Stewart. Shamar Stewart, definitely a very intriguing prospect, very, very talented, freakishly athletic, not very productive in college, so there was a mixed bag there for sure. It was a complicated issue whether or not he was worthy of being a first-round pick. The Bengals took him pretty high in the draft, all things considered. Shamar Stewart, I thought he was going to go in the first round. I didn't necessarily think he was going to go in the top 20. Regardless, that's not really what we're here to talk about. We are here on June 14th, and Shamar Stewart has still not signed his contract. Now, he's not the only first-round pick to have not signed his contract yet, but he is the only one that is going through an ugly fight over it. I'll say fight. It's a little bit more than just a discussion at this point, I think. And now he's departed the mandatory minicamp, or I think the mandatory minicamp for the Bengals is now done because it's the weekend. But the point is, he didn't fully participate in the camp, and he's clearly unhappy about not having a contract. And he made some comments to the media that pretty clearly indicated he is not happy right now. He criticized the front office of the Bengals. He criticized the Bengals organization. He said things that you almost never hear from a rookie about the NFL franchise that they're currently working for. Like, this is unprecedented. I don't know if I've ever heard of a situation like this since the CBA dictated rookie contracts. Like, before CBA dictated rookie contracts and they had to be negotiated, I could see something like this happening. This kind of thing should not really be happening now. So I've been doing this for most of my life, and then all of a sudden it's gone over something very simple to fix. It's kind of disappointing. Zach Taylor had some comments that went back, but this is now officially dragging into the kind of dead part of the offseason after rookie mini camps, OTAs, and the mandatory mini camp. So what this is over, and this is going to sound very, this is going to sound really weird, right? This is going to sound like something that should not happen, and it is something that should not happen. According to Kelsey Conway of the Cincinnati Enquirer, the Bengals are trying to change the language in the contract for their first-round pick that allows the team to void future guarantees. Now, what this means in terms of effect on Shamar Stewart isn't necessarily made clear by that statement, but I've done some research into this. I've done some looking into this. I've read some things that people have said. Near as I can tell, what they are trying to do is put a clause in the contract that makes it so they can void all of Shamar Stewart's guarantees if he ever ends up showing an injury that is pre-existing before he signed the contract, like from before he joined the team. They're trying to make it so they can void all of his guarantees, all of them, not just for 1 year, but for the whole thing, if he's ever absent for a practice and that he's ever absent for a meeting. So that's never been done before, to be clear, to my knowledge. I don't think there's ever been anything like that before. Worst I've ever heard was the contract clauses in Kyler Murray's contract that said he needs to study more film. And honestly, that whole thing was just kind of a joke, right? That was just something we as football fans laugh at a little bit. And it's a little bit embarrassing, but this is pretty punitive. This is, you do anything wrong ever for any reason. If you're ever late for a practice, if you're ever late for a meeting, if you're ever, if anything goes wrong, if we end up finding some pre-existing injury, we void all your guarantees. And again, I want to stress that's unprecedented. I think that Shamar Stewart's father tweeted the other day talking about how ridiculous this is. And I don't know if this has something to do with the team not liking what they see with Shamar Stewart. Maybe they're, now that they've had him in the building, now that they've had a look at him, they're like, yeah, we don't like this guy's effort. We need to keep a fire lit underneath him. We need to make sure there are financial consequences if he ends up slacking off. I mean, I guess I could understand there could be something going on there like that, but if that's how you feel about Shamar Stewart, you shouldn't have drafted him so high. And these are not things that you ever see in the NFL. Even if Shamar Stewart is a risk, that's a risk you just have to eat as a franchise. You draft him, you give him the rookie contract that every other team gives their rookies. As this article goes on to say, by the way, this language was not included in the contract of Myles Murphy or Amarius Mims, who were two recent Cincinnati first-round picks. So this is something new they're trying to do for Shamar Stewart, specifically for him. Now, maybe that says something not so great about Shamar Stewart, but the point I'm trying to make is, if you're going to take a guy in the first round, in the top 20, you better be willing to live with a little bit of risk. You better see something so good there that you're willing to live with the fact that you're a little bit worried about his work ethic. And if you're that worried about his work ethic, then don't draft the guy. But what this really highlights, and this is a pattern that goes back decades. This is something that goes back like 30 plus years. The Bengals under Mike Brown, the owner of the Bengals, are very, very well known to be comically cheap. Maybe the cheapest team in football. Now, I don't know if Mike Brown is short on cash and he can't do things the way other owners do. I don't know if he's short on money. I don't know exactly what's going on there in terms of his personal finances. Even if I looked it up, there's no guarantee anything I find would be accurate to reality. But he has always been that owner, more than probably any other NFL owner, that just doesn't want to spend money. The Bengals were known for having the smallest scouting department in the NFL, and I believe they are still known for that. They did not have an indoor practice facility until 3 years ago. They were the last team to have one. You go back to the 90s. Guys like Corey Dillon and Carl Pickens publicly voiced their displeasure with the team's willingness to spend money. TJ Houshmandzadeh criticized them for not being willing to throw money around the way pretty much every other team does. You have to buy your own Gatorade. You have to buy your own towels. It's a pretty ugly situation, and it's not a coincidence that this Bengals team has never won a Super Bowl and been largely non-competitive during his ownership. I actually looked this up right before this video because it occurred to me, I didn't know who the Bengals general manager was. They don't really have a general manager. They have not had a general manager since the 90s. They have a director of player of personnel operations or something like that. It's been the same guy since 1999 when they drafted Alkali Smith or Alkali Smith or whatever his name was. So they have a general manager, quote unquote, and he's not really a general manager, but he basically functions as one, who has kept his job for over 25 years, even though that period of time includes not winning a playoff game for, what was it? They went like 20 years without a playoff win, and they still have the same guy in charge of personnel. Other teams don't operate like this. Like they are one of one in this field. And this really highlights, and this is where I'm leading it back to the Seahawks here, because I know you might be wondering, like, what does this have to do with us? It highlights how a team really cannot survive having a bad owner. I remember many, many years ago, some of my viewers probably don't even really remember this, when Carson Palmer was on the Bengals. His relationship with that organization got to the point where he was in his prime, and he actually held out and said, I will retire before I play for this team again. They have to trade me. I refuse to play for this team again. I would rather retire. He would go on to get traded to the Raiders, get released from the Raiders, go to the Cardinals, and have a season that almost won league MVP. So he still had good football left. He just wasn't willing to give it to the Bengals anymore because he was that sick of that organization. And it's a great illustration of how ownership, if it's bad, it's almost impossible to overcome. Maybe it can be overcome here and there, like the Bengals did make the Super Bowl a few years ago, but overall, it can't be overcome. You have an incredibly high degree of difficulty overcoming that. And as the Seahawks are a team that is a few years away from having a new owner, because it hasn't been officially said for sure yet, but I think we all know that Jody Allen is not going to be the owner of the Seahawks much longer. She's already started the process of selling the Blazers, and I've been over this stuff before, but she is going to sell. Something like this really reminds you how important it is that we get this ownership thing right. We need somebody who has enough money to not worry about stuff like this. The Bengals, until this recent offseason, when they paid T. Higgins and Ja'Marr Chase, and then you go back a couple off seasons to when they paid Joe Burrow. Other than those contracts, they don't like to pay players anything long-term. They don't like to give out guarantees. They have generally tried to avoid that the best that they can. They do everything within their power to not give out those long-term deals. They had to do it with Burrow because that's just, he's too good. Ja'Marr Chase, same thing. And I think they decided that keeping T. Higgins was around because with that trio, Burrow, Chase, Higgins, you have one of the most exciting teams in the league. And I think they decided that was worth keeping around. But this is a team that was known for decades for just not wanting to be the team that would give out guaranteed money unless it was to a true blue superstar. You have Chad Ochocinco. Yeah, they would throw money at him. Carson Palmer, when he was great, they paid him. He's a quarterback. They gave a bunch of money to Andy Dalton, AJ Green, but they're not willing to do much of anything to keep somebody that they don't view as a true star. And either Mike Brown doesn't have a lot of money on hand, because remember, when you give out those big long-term contracts, a lot of that money has to go into escrow because a lot of it's guaranteed. So you have to give a huge sum of money up front on these big contracts. That's a big reason why Mike Brown doesn't want to do that stuff. Either he doesn't want to, or he can't really afford to because he doesn't have enough money. And I think we have seen in recent years the ownership of the Seahawks, because Jody is a caretaker, not want to put those big investments into Seahawks contracts, because she doesn't want to put a ton of her money into escrow when she's not even going to own the team for much longer. But I don't want it to get to a point where the permanent owner has those same shortcomings, and he's not willing to do that. So this is important. Because we don't want to end up like this, right? We don't want to end up like the Bengals, a team that has never won a Super Bowl, a team that has spent much of their existence being known as the team that couldn't win a playoff game. Remember, they went through the 90s, most of the 90s, the Carson Palmer era, the Andy Dalton era with no playoff wins. They didn't get off the schneid until Joe Burrow in the 2020s. That's what it took. So I can't remember exactly how long the playoff drought was. It was almost 30 years. And then they make one Super Bowl, and then they make the AFC title game the next year, and we'll see where things go from here. But think about how goofy it is to have something like this lingering over you. How is this contract offset worth the bad press? How is it worth losing potentially the rookie year of your top rookie when you should be thinking Super Bowl right now? You have Joe Burrow in his prime. You have just big-time paid Jamar Chase, big-time paid T. Higgins. You should be thinking, let's go win the Super Bowl right now. But no, you're getting involved in some stupid stuff with your top rookie. We all know what's going on with Trey Hendrickson now. The Trey Hendrickson thing I'm a little more sympathetic on because I think there are some things there that would make you shy away from paying just as a football move. I'm a little more sympathetic there, but there's not much sympathy here. So it really highlights the need to have a good owner. And I think Jody Allen, and I want to say this, even though I think she's been a little bit hesitant to give out monster contracts because of her situation, I don't think that Jody Allen's been a bad owner. In fact, I think she's probably been a pretty good owner overall. A lot of owners would have killed the Russell Wilson trade because that's our star. We can't trade him. A lot of owners wouldn't have entertained the possibility of firing Pete Carroll. She did. I think those are signs of an owner that is engaged and willing to do interesting things and mix it up while ultimately also trusting the decision makers that work for the team. I don't know if she's been great the way Paul Allen was, but very few owners can be as good as Paul Allen was as an owner. He was special. He was different. And I'm not going to hold Jody Allen to the standard of Paul Allen. But you look at something like this and you're like, you do not want to get caught up in this. You do not want to deal with this. So got to get this ownership hire right. Do not end up with a Mike Brown. Do not end up in this situation where we have to deal with garbage like this in the offseason. And hey, it's a cautionary tale. Heart goes out to the Bengals fans. Life can't be easy sometimes. See you guys later. Go Hawks.